Jason DeVille is here at the cafeteria at Hunter College High School with Hunter College alum Brendan Fang, and we are here to discuss our top 10 for week 6. Let's get right into it. Who's number one? Number one, is that mine?
No, that's yep. MSIT.
Number one is MSIT, College of Staten Island. Won a big tournament at Fort Hamilton a couple of weeks ago, and most recently at Seward Park. Took first place in that, and in a pool that had Fort Hamilton High School, the pool that had Bronx Science, the pool that had Seward Park. Came out of that pool in first place, and then finished the rest of the tournament unscathed and undefeated. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about this week. So we had the Seward Park tournament, we had Grover Cleveland, which we'll get into a little bit later. I think that Coach David Mahon has got his players playing at a very high level at the right time. They're playing their best volleyball towards the end, going into the playoffs, which is a week and a half from now. And Daniel Bronstein, who's been hitting a little bit of outside, also blocking a little bit of opposite, found his rhythm, and they look like a snowball getting bigger on the way down.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I mean, just to add on, I think the players are playing, together. Great team defense, like always. Every year you can just expect them to always play as a team, and they always get better as the year goes on. So look to them to improve even more, which is a little bit scary considering they're number one right now on the list.
Yep. Who's number two, Brendan?
Number two is our former number one, Fort Hamilton. They actually played pretty well at the Seward Park tournament, but I think they slipped up a little. They lost to a surging DeWitt Clinton team in the semifinals of that tournament after, I believe, placing second in their pool.
Yeah, first place tie.
To MSIT. Oh, first place tie.
Yeah, but they beat them. MSIT beat them too. Okay. So that was the head-to-head.
That was the head-to-head. I think they're right where they were supposed to be. They had a little bit of a slip-up, but MSIT surged, and that's why they're at number 2 this week.
Very good. Number 3, we have the new kids on the block actually moved into the top 5. They plowed through it with a tank because of Amin Barenbeck. He's a bad man. Outside hitter extraordinaire has catapulted his team to number 3, Environmental High School of Environmental Studies. The Eagles, hey, have won the Grover Cleveland tournament, undefeated in pool, undefeated in the playoffs, and with a big matchup coming up against Stuyvesant, and we already know the results, but we can't give it away. They have every reason, every bit to be at number 3.
Absolutely, and they're looking to. Well, they avenged their loss to Stuyvesant during the tournament, no?
No, undefeated. They beat Stuyvesant in pool.
No, I'm saying in the tournament they avenged their loss earlier.
That's right, because Stuyvesant had beaten them in their division.
In the division,
right.
Exactly. So they avenged their loss, and that was really, honestly, their only big loss of the season. So having avenged that, I feel like it makes sense that they've really risen up the ranks to be number 3 on this list.
Yep. Okay. Who do we have number 4?
Number 4, we have Brooklyn Tech, who's a former number 3, I believe. They still have Dominic. They still have their power hitting. But I guess some of the
didn't happen this weekend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like their drop was a little bit more due to the strength of the other teams. The other teams surging rather than them really slipping. Really, Brooklyn Tech is still a very, very strong team because of Dominic, and they'll continue to play as well as they can. But I feel like some of the cracks are showing. Where it's hard to be a one-man team. Even really if that one man is really, really good.
Yeah, well, you got Munchin, who's a setter and sometimes outside hitter, that was the utility guy this whole tournament, and he does it even in Dominic's presence, and they finally had their rotation set up where they're thinking about it less and they're just doing it. So. Yeah. Now, number 5, and remaining at number 5 from last week, is Grover Cleveland. Grover Cleveland played well as they hosted their own tournament. They finished second in pool to Townsend Harris, but took the second spot, made it to the semifinals, and still played great volleyball. They just ran into the train. They were standing on the train tracks when Environmental was coming through. So good team, wrong place, wrong time. They will have some opportunities to avenge their loss against Richmond Hill. I think they have in the last game of the season in their division. They lost to them earlier on, and they have Hillcrest coming up. So they have a very important 2 games to finish. I'm not really sure where they're going in tournaments this week, but we'll have to wait and see.
So at number 6 we have Regis High School. You know, they've been performing very well all year long.
Yeah.
You know, I actually managed to take a look at some of their video for once. You know.
Oh, do tell.
Exactly, and I believe that, you know, out of all the teams, they're probably one of the teams that can rival MSIT in terms of team defense. They're very good defensive players. They hustle for the ball. They dig well. They're very good ball control. I think where MSIT especially separates from them is that Regis has their offense a little bit predictable and, you know, not with a huge amount of firepower.
Right.
You know, they play very, you know, vanilla concepts, which is great. But
They're kind of like Staten Island Tech without the offense.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that, you know, that gets them victories in their own division. It gives them victories against other public school teams, and I think they're very appropriately at number 6.
Very good. Which leads us to number 7, Seward Park Campus, Manhattan's favorite team, second favorite team, or maybe third in this case, has actually moved up a couple of spots from last week, and they played very, very well in tournaments, and they've had some losses here and there, but I think something that needs to be said about this team is that 13 of their last 24, they went the last 3 tournaments, 13 of the last 24 sets they played were decided by 2. And they have not played in pools against teams that are not in the top 10. In their pool they had Fort Hamilton, and their pool they had MSIT, and their pool they had Bronx Science. So, and in their division they have Hunter High School, who they have to play 3 times, who they've lost to in the beginning of the season, and who they beaten the second time and have a very big match against them coming up. They're hosting one more tournament this weekend, and time will tell if they move up or down. But if they get out of the pool like they did last time, they'll probably stay at number 6, or should I say number 7.
And at number 8 we have Bronx Science. They're, you know, a perfect 8-0 in their own division with Walton and Clinton in their division. 2 very, you know, impressive teams actually. You know, so the fact that they're undefeated does speak a lot. However, they are 4-4 outside of their division, which is a little troubling. But until I feel like, you know, they've really slipped, I think that being in the top 10 at number 8, you know, we should give them a lot of credit for staying 8-0 in their division.
Yeah, there's something to be said about doing housekeeping in your division, especially if there are at least 2 teams in your division that are actually remain competitive in tournaments. Which leads us to number 9, Hunter College High School. Why and Sam, who would you say this team is still in the top 10? Well, one, they're in a tough division, or an improved division, as long as Seward Park's there, and as long as they have to play Seward Park 3 times, and as long as they're splitting sets, they'll do good. And they've been to tournaments, and though they have not done great or up to their standards or what people expect Hunter to be, they have not lost in any of these tournaments. They're splitting with Brooklyn Tech, they're splitting with Tottenville, they're splitting with Richmond Hill in these tournaments, and they haven't really gotten any losses in their record. What tends to be their Achilles heel, I think, this year has been Clinton, the second place team, they're projected to finish second. Right now they're third. Clinton High School is actually the team that has beaten Hunter High School twice in tournaments at Tottenville, and they also beat them in pool. It was basically a first place or go home. If you won, you weren't even second place, or if you lost, you weren't even second, you were out. So it was a first place or go home. And Clinton High School, who I'd like to mention, who's not in this top 10, but we're going to talk about a little bit later, caught fire. So Hunter, they've dropped in the rankings, but because they haven't been winning, but they're not out of the top 10 because at the same time they have not been losing.
Number 10, we have Bryant High School, who I believe dropped a bit from 8th place. And Bryant, you know, same thing we've said all year. They're one of they're in one of the most competitive divisions in the PSAL, and they're looking like the best team at the division, which says a lot.
Yeah.
You know? They are a little bit inconsistent here and there, but they did beat, you know, a very good division before in aviation. And you know, they're looking pretty strong. As long as they stay consistent, you know, if all the chemistry works out, I feel like they have a chance at going on a run for that number 1 position.
Yeah, very good, very good. Let's okay. Before we talk about the top 10, where they are and where let's just say our predictive validity will lead us. I'd like to talk about some of the teams that were not in the top 10, but worth mentioning. And I'd like to start with Clinton High School. Clinton High School, for lack of a better term, has went total beast mode the last 2 weeks and has just played lights out volleyball. They're blocking at a higher level. They're hitting. They're playing insane defense. They're serving intelligently. And most importantly, there's a mental toughness that's come with this team where they have a very short memory of bad plays. You don't see them come down on each other. You see them pick each other up, and that's the kind of team that's going to be very dangerous going into the postseason. It'll only get better.
I mean, you just hope that this consistency will last. Even looking at them in the beginning of the season, it was clear that they had a dangerous team. It was more like, but it seemed like more of just like moving parts instead of a sum of its parts. And I think they've been trying to come together, especially these last 2 weeks, as we said. They beat Fort Hamilton, our previous #1 in the semifinals.
The first set was 25-16.
Right.
Second set, they held on 28-26. Held on.
That's impressive.
That's impressive.
A 2-win victory against Fort Hamilton. A 2-point victory. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I mean, Fort Hamilton had been winning these 2-point games all season long.
Yeah.
So for Clinton to say no. We're going to take this to
this one's ours.
This one's ours, and to get into the finals of a pretty prestigious tournament.
It is a prestigious tournament because five of the top of the 10 teams in this tournament are in this top 10.
Exactly.
Bronx Science is there. Hunter was there. Staten Island Tech McKee was there. Brooklyn Tech was there.
Fort Hamilton.
Fort Hamilton. So I mean, and including some of the teams from outside looking in. So they eventually lost to the eventual champions. MSIT, who continues to be their Achilles heel. That's their second loss because they lost to Tottenville in the quarterfinals.
Exactly.
So they'll find a way to get over that hump. They run into a problem because they already have 3 losses in their division. So the way the PSL rankings work is they will not put Clinton ahead of Bronx Science, even if Clinton's playing better volleyball at the time. There's a natural order of things that the PSL brass likes to put things into, where divisional records still hold priority.
Well, it makes sense to a certain degree because Bronx Science has beaten Clinton.
Twice.
Exactly. That does say something.
And one of them was a beer game. One of them was 25-9. I don't know how long ago that was, but the score is what the score is.
Exactly. The second team on here is Benjamin Cardozo of Queens. As we said for many of these past videos, they're always a very strong team. They're coached by
Dan Scarola, one of the Scarola brothers,
who's been coaching them for a very long time. And it says something about their stability. When you have the same coach at the school for that long, and you've had this continued success, so they're always dangerous.
They're always dangerous at the end.
Exactly.
They're always dangerous at the end. You see some of these tournaments there in the beginning of the tournament, they're not getting out of pool play, and they're like, okay, down here for Cardozo, down here for Cardozo. That's what happened this season. That's what happened last season at the beginning, whatever. And there they were, ranked 5th. That's what happened the season before. They didn't have early success, and they wound up in the final. So. I guess that's what it takes to be a Scarola. Which leads us to the other Scarola. Frank Scarola is the head coach of Richmond Hill, who was also mentioned on this team on the bubble on the outside looking in. Richmond Hill had beaten Grover Cleveland. They are undefeated in the division, and and as long as they hold that victory and going into the Cardozo tournament, they made the playoffs. They took first in that division, eventually losing to Grover Cleveland in a revenge match. But I think the point is they're in the mix and they belong.
Absolutely. And let's speak about actually a school that actually dropped out in the top 10 for a couple of weeks, a little bit ago, but continues to be on the bubble, LaGuardia.
Yeah.
They still have.
Von Titus, another bad man.
Right, but I think teams are starting to figure out, how to stop their system and, how to either stop Von Titus himself or just let him try to have him win the game completely and stop everybody else.
Well, there's a little thing going on with the coach and the players. That the coach is running the 4-2, and the players actually prefer a 5-1 or 6-2. And I just found out one of their setters got hurt. Right. So I think right now they're everybody's forced into that same direction where they have to go 5-1 now. I mean, it's the only way I see that going. And with a match at the end of their season in their divisional play against Environmental, they do have a chance to have a say in all of this. Another team that dropped out of the top 10 a while ago, but they still deserve to be mentioned, is Long Island City. Long Island City was at the aviation tournament. They did really well, finished 7-1 in their pool. Ended up beating Bryant in the finals. And I scrimmaged against them myself. I went over there 2 days after that tournament and played 4 sets against them, and we split sets. And there they are, just as deserving as anybody else. They beat Bryant. They can beat us on any given day. So I mean, they can easily be 10-9 or 8. And they're also one of those teams in Queens I believe it's Queens A1. That is the absolute single toughest division in New York City. They are so good in that division. Last year, they had 3 teams make it to the quarterfinals. Of the final 8, 3 of the teams came from that division. It was Hillcrest. Hillcrest went deep too. It was Newtown. It was Long Island City, and it was third team escapes me. Academy of American Studies.
Yep.
That's right. Academy of American Studies, who right now has its first place tie with they're 5-2. I think another team's 5-2, and I think the next 3 are like 4-3.
Bryant.
So it's going to be very, very tough.
Bryant is the other who's in the top 10, and therefore, just from being tied as our number 10 team, American Studies does deserve to be mentioned, along those lines.
Yep. Also to be mentioned, Townsend Harris has played good volleyball. They've beaten Cardozo in divisional play, and then they lost to Bayside, who also deserves to be mentioned because Bayside is taking Cardozo to 3 sets. They're taking this team to 3 sets, so they're in the mix, and you just never know how that team's going to be.
These are all teams that are almost on the bubble because they keep beating each other.
Another surging team I'd like to mention also is Stuyvesant. Stuyvesant was in the same pool of the Grover Cleveland tournament with Environmental, lost to them, but actually sucked up the pain, and in the semifinals, they got out of the pool, made it to the semifinals, and made it to the finals, and to face Environmental High School again and lose again. And now they have a 4th matchup, which actually, on our record date, happened yesterday, but we're not telling.
So is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, there's one more thing I'd like to talk about. I want to talk about certain teams that certain people feel are deserving to be in the top 10 and certain spots that are deserving to be in the top 10. First things first, as a disclaimer, for a lot of you kids watching this on YouTube or whatever, or a lot of the coaches watching, tell your coach, if you don't vote, don't bitch, okay? That's how it goes, okay? So if they don't vote, they can't call the list. I'll just say BS or whatever. They can't call the list not legitimate. I think the more votes that happen, the more legit the list comes, because the more the votes even out. A lot of people thought Bronx Science shouldn't have been in the top 10 because of their recent play and the tournaments they didn't get out of pool play. But they're in their division and they're doing housekeeping against very competitive teams. A lot of people thought Hunter College High School shouldn't be in the top 10, but as the coach,
count me as one of them.
Yeah, hey, as the coach, we're not losing to these teams either. We're not losing. We lost to Clinton twice, and those are I won't call it a fluke, but in light of Hunter's pattern and how we played even as up to this year, I would call that an anomaly. All right.
Although I do think it's a little bit of an anomaly, I also do have to give Clinton credit.
Of course. So lightning struck twice.
No, but I'm saying, these are weekly polls.
Yeah.
So I feel like I personally would put Clinton above Hunter College High School just from,
You put Clinton above a first place team?
Yes.
Okay.
It's hard. I know it's hard because again, as you've mentioned, Clinton hasn't even been Walton in their own division.
But I would put
think
Clinton ahead of Bronx Science. Bronx Science was in the same tournament.
Maybe.
They didn't get out of pool. Clinton got out, and Clinton made the finals.
I don't actually have an opinion on that one. That one is probably a toss-up because I haven't watched as much tape of Bronx Science, so I can't say for sure.
Right.
I just know that from what I saw from Hunter College High School and Clinton, I think Clinton's one spot above Hunter College High School.
You're certainly not.
Maybe Hunter College High School is 10. And maybe Clinton is 9.
You were not alone.
I'm not sure.
You were not alone. There are several coaches that actually voted Clinton ahead of of Hunter College High School. And by the way, for the record, my votes are open because I'm the one gathering data and information on the poll. Everyone else's votes are confidential, but mine are open and notorious. I voted Clinton at number 8, and I voted Hunter College High School at number 9. So just for the record, there were 2 coaches. The one I won't mention because I just won't, but I can mention for myself. I was one of the coaches that actually put Clinton ahead of us.
Right.
So it's just a discussion, not really a debate.
Right.
But unless we want to debate about agreeing.
No, but I think we're in agreement about that.
Absolutely. It's a weekly voting poll.
Right, exactly.
They deserve it.
I'm saying I'm not saying that Hunter High School should definitely drop out.
No, and in fact, the top 10 list, Bryant and Hunter High School have the 9th and 10th spot, but they're tied for the 9th and 10th spot. So if you actually have them in the same spot with the 9th place tie, Clinton's actually on this list at 10.
Exactly.
I of course think they're deserving to be a little higher, but there you have it. Mm-hmm. The other thing I'd like to talk about is where these teams are going to end up at the end. You got MSIT at first.
Right.
There's a very good chance they'll stay there. If they don't go to a tournament and just rest on their lines and just finish cleaning house in their division, I think they'll stay at first.
Right. I mean, I think I mentioned that Fort Hamilton and Brooklyn Tech would be 1-2 if they don't have any bad losses or if no other teams have really great wins. But those happen. Fort Hamilton lost to DeWitt Clinton, so there's your somewhat. It's not a terrible loss, but it's not a great loss. It's not like, oh, you lost to the number 2 team.
No, not at all.
That's a pretty far away loss. So that was a bad loss combined with MSIT's amazing victories, including against Fort Hamilton as well.
Right.
If MSIT had just beaten Fort Hamilton and only in pools, that would have been like, hey,
Yeah, but they beat them twice.
Exactly.
Right. They beat them at the Fort, I believe at the Fort Hamilton tournament, and then just over the weekend.
Exactly. So I feel like that you can't put Fort Hamilton above MSIT anymore. MSIT has to be number 1.
But I also think a lot of like MSIT looks pretty safe if they actually just win out.
Absolutely.
But I also think there's something to be said about activity in tournaments for the teams that remaining go to tournaments. There are 2 tournaments left this weekend. There's the Seward Park has a referees in training tournament, which I as a coach like to stay away from, which is why I went to a tournament last week. And there's another tournament, Hillcrest is also having a tournament. And Environmental High School is going to both.
Yeah.
So here's my question. What if Environmental wins both?
It's hard to say.
Ooh.
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. It would depend on what Fort Hamilton did during that time. Yeah. And honestly, if they're 2-3, if you're talking about semifinals, I don't really know if it matters that much unless you're talking about matchups in the quarterfinals where you're like, who gets a matchup at 7, who gets a matchup at 6. But the way I look at it is, if you're going through a PSAL tournament, if you want to be a champion, you have to go through everywhere. Yeah. And you might have some bad matchups that you want to avoid, but you have to deal with it. And I feel like if Environmental does really well at those tournaments, they don't have to win both, but but if they did, and Fort Hamilton kind of did really well, you can have an argument for either 1 or 2 and 3.
Yeah. Well, I think when you do seedings, I think a lot of people are victims of the present moment. And I think doing seedings, I think people have to look at the whole body of work. I think it's not fair to not consider Bryant just because they won a tournament last month. I mean, it wasn't last year.
Exactly.
It was last month. I think there's something to be said about being in the top 10 or since we're talking about PSL rankings,
right.
I'm going to talk about the top 8. Because with all the politicking that goes on, at the end of the day, when these coaches get in there and they debate about the top 10, they're really talking about the top 8 because it is included but not limited to home games. Right. Your first round, home games your second round. And then if the third round is at a neutral site, and I don't know if PSL is doing that this year, I think they last year the quarterfinals, the third round, the quarterfinals. Last year the quarterfinals was at the higher seed when all the previous years was at a neutral site.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure if they're going to do that, but if they do that, maybe being top 4 says something about that too. And that's what's going. That's what's really going on with this topic. But there's something. But I'm going to finish this by saying there's something to be said about teams that actually won tournaments. I mean, in previous years, you'd have Brooklyn Tech not win any tournaments. And that was last year and the year before, not win any tournaments and still have the 7th spot. Yeah. You have Cardozo, didn't win any tournaments, and then they were in the 5th spot. You know,
I mean,
you have Long Island City won no tournaments, and then they had the 4th spot. So, and then you have Hunter College High School last year was 38-1, and there's this discussion we should be too, just because of the one loss. You know, so I think there's an an unfair level of thinking that comes to that, and I think environmental for so long has been part of that. Like if Staten Island Tech and if Fort Hamilton and Brooklyn Tech had the same success that environmental had this year. Take environmental's name out of that and put any of those 3 names, all 3 of those guys would be like a 3-way tie for number 1. That's just my opinion.
Well, to be fair, it's also about, you know, how they play a little bit as well. You know, people are a little worried, to be fair, with both environmental and Brooklyn Tech because they seem a little like top heavy. You know?
Right.
But I think that again, top heavy teams have shown in the past to go very far in the tournament. You know, it's been. I don't think I remember a top heavy team winning the PSAL tournament. But that doesn't mean you don't give them that high seed.
No,
you know?
yeah, I agree.
You still give them that high seed, but you know that's why you don't rank them number 1. Right? That's why MSIT and Fort Hamilton, who I believe are the 2 teams that have played the best team volleyball this season, are the one that's like the 2 seeds.
Yep. You know? Yeah, very few years you have like one player or 2 players just where those 2 players alone are so powerful. They're number 1, which goes back to my which goes back to my personal bias against.
They got as high as number 2, right? Like
the Casca brothers.
Right, the Casca brothers.
Well, they were number 1.
But they actually had a pretty good supporting cast too. They had like a solid cast, and I think they played together.
Yeah, I agree.
They think they played together. You know, that's what I mean though. Like it doesn't matter if you have these players who are so much better than your teammates, but it's whether those teammates play together.
Got it.
And that's the thing. And I think environmental and Brooklyn Tech, they do play together, you know, for the most part. But I think that, you know, there's just this, you know, they are lacking at some of those positions. Whereas for Hamilton and MSIT, it'd be hard to see them like ever, you know, show any cracks. Really.
No.
They win as a team, they lose as a team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We could share stories about that too, ad nauseum. But that's all I got. What do you got?
I'm good. I think we've talked about everything.
I think that's it.
Yeah, that'll be it.
That's it. Stay tuned next time. Okay, this is week 6. This is week 6 for the top 10 voted poll. Congratulations to MSIT for being number 1. For Brendan Fang, I'm Jason DeBrey.
Remember to vote.
So long.